The Supreme Court is taking up the healthcare challenge. What will they be considering and what's not in there so far? This is the CitizenLink report. I'm Stuart Shepard along with my friend and colleague Bruce Hausknecht, who keeps track of the courts for us. Hi, Bruce.
Hi, Stuart.
Before we get started with you, just a quick reminder that this Saturday is the Thanksgiving Family Forum. It's a presidential forum that'll be held in Des Moines, Iowa. And I just want to let you know a few things. First, it will not be on television. No one has agreed to pick it up at this point, but you'll be able to watch the whole thing live on CitizenLink.com on Saturday, depending on what time zone you're in. It runs from 4 to 6 Central Time, which is 5 to 7 Eastern, and you can figure out the rest. But we will be streaming it live. We've got a satellite truck up there, Bruce, that we're going to park outside the church, beam it back here to our headquarters, and code it from here. That also allows us to share it with news affiliates and news stations around the country, which we're going to do. So just go to CitizenLink.com. You may also go to Facebook.com/CitizenLink, where it will also be streaming. And more than 100 radio stations will be carrying it as well live on Saturday. We're publishing that list on CitizenLink today as we're recording this, and we'll keep updating that as the event draws closer. So there you go. Family Forum this Saturday in Des Moines. We encourage you to watch that. Make an appointment on your calendar. Bruce, just wanted to talk to you about this. It is hard to keep track of all the challenges to the healthcare law, but finally the Supreme Court has said, okay, we're going to take this part of it and talk about it. Tell us what's happening.
Right. Well, as many of our constituents already know, there have been dozens of lawsuits filed alleging that the new Health Care Act is unconstitutional. They've been filed all around the country, but several of them have reached the Supreme Court this week, as a matter of fact. Primarily the one from Florida and one from Virginia involving Liberty University.
Now, they've set aside an unusual amount of time to hear these cases, which kind of gives you an idea of the gravity they're putting on this.
It does tell you that this is unprecedented. 5.5 hours set aside for argument over the course of 2 days.
Wow.
To address the very heavy constitutional questions involved in these cases.
And for comparison, even a significant case usually just gets an hour. I mean, Roe v. Wade got an hour, if I remember correctly.
That's how it works.
Yeah, but this time, 5.5 hours, they're going to talk about a lot of different sections of this. And let's talk about what they're going to talk about. First, the individual mandate. What is it and why is the court considering it?
Right. Well, the individual mandate is almost the funding mechanism for the rest of the statute. It forces you and I and everyone else to purchase health insurance by 2014 or pay a fine or a penalty or a tax to the IRS.
Right.
And that's been alleged by the various people that file these lawsuits to be unconstitutional. The Constitution, as you recall, is a document of enumerated powers, meaning we haven't given Congress unlimited reach to enact any law they want to. They're bound by certain things like the Commerce Clause, which is involved here. Can Congress order you to purchase something? And that's what is at the heart of the healthcare issue on that.
Let me ask you just a question from a regular person's standpoint. The government can tell me to wear a seatbelt. It can put restrictions on the things that I buy at the store as far as what can be in them and what cannot be in them. Why can't they say buy health insurance?
The basic reason is in all those other things you just suggested, you have already entered the stream of commerce. You go to the store or you drive a car, you have already chosen to enter commerce in some way, shape, or form. But this is the first time that many people can figure out anyway that Congress has ordered you to do something you've already chosen not to do. If you have chosen not to purchase health care insurance for whatever reason, this is now ordering you to do so upon penalties and fines. And that is being argued as an overreach of the Constitution.
And with this, the only qualification you have to have is if you're alive, you've got to buy health insurance according to the health care reform law.
And that's the basic objection. You're not in commerce. Your requirement for buying this insurance is that you're alive and walking around.
Now, there's another part of this. It's something that sounds hard to understand, but it's really pretty straightforward. The word is severability. Describe for us what it is and why the court's considering it.
This is really an important issue because, as we know, this Health Care Act is several thousand pages long with hundreds of different provisions. But this funding provision, the individual mandate as it's called, is the heart of it. If that doesn't work, the whole healthcare system that this law created will collapse because it won't have any of the funds that it needs to get it started.
Right.
So the legal issue that the courts are addressing is whether if they find that the mandate is unconstitutional, whether the rest of the law can stand? Meaning, can they enforce the rest of the provisions of the healthcare law? Or is it so essential to the rest of the law that the entire law has to be stricken?
Yeah, and basically, I mean, when you look at this, if you're going to say social medicine, an idea of government-run healthcare is a good thing, the only way that can function economically, especially when you throw in the no pre-existing conditions part, which they trotted out early because they wanted people to say, oh, how wonderful this is. But if you have those two things, you have to have them or it cannot function, because if you don't make people buy it, there's not enough money coming in to hold the whole thing up. It collapses.
That's right. And the only other alternatives are to increase all of our taxes or force the states to pick up the cost, which means the states will be taxing us. So it's a lose-lose.
So those two together really are what are going to determine the future of healthcare when it gets right down to it. The individual mandate and severability. So now when we read about it, we'll know what we're talking about.
Those are the key issues. There are a couple others involved, but those are the key ones.
One particularly interesting argument that the government attorneys brought up, the administration attorneys defending Obamacare, they said that, well, you know what? You can't even bring a challenge to this law yet because the law says you can't challenge something if you haven't paid taxes on it yet. And officially, we're not going to pay taxes on Obamacare until 2014. Hence, you can't even bring the challenge yet.
Right. It's an interesting technical argument, but Congress many years ago passed this statute so that people couldn't simply avoid paying their taxes by filing a lawsuit.
Yeah.
So the law basically says you can certainly object to the tax, but not before you've paid it.
And the curious thing about this is it's a stall tactic because, as we've seen, our health care here where we work, the company that provides that is stopping. They're getting out of the healthcare business at the end of this year because of the healthcare reform law. A lot of companies are getting out of the field. They're changing what they're doing, and the longer they can stretch out this court challenge, the more likely it will be impossible to undo what they've done.
Well, that's part of the serious nature of this healthcare law is what it's doing to the private sector. And if it's ever declared unconstitutional, will the private sector be able to come back?
Yeah, will they have the confidence to come back, or
Right.
will it just shake around again like that?
Right.
As you watch this, what are the things that you're going to be watching for? What should people be looking at as this gets closer? We're expecting it to be heard probably next spring sometime.
Right, right. I would expect that we'll see a couple of things. We'll see the issue of whether Justice Kagan needs to recuse herself from this case because she was Solicitor General while this thing was being passed.
Meaning the attorney for the government.
She's the attorney for the government for a while there before she was nominated to the Supreme Court. And because of her intimate knowledge of the law and her advisors that reported to her, does she need to recuse herself? That's one issue.
Yeah.
Another issue is going to be what is going to happen at the state level in response to this lawsuit. They have several items they have to obey under this law. But if they are waiting for it to be declared unconstitutional, they don't know whether to go forward or stay still.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. We also had this email from Elena Kagan, which has shown up, which appears to indicate that she was celebrating the passage of the healthcare law. Appears to, because it wasn't very specific. It was very terse in its wording.
Right. Well, she says that she walled herself off from any knowledge of the legal issues involved. Says she was perhaps knowledgeable when it was first passed, which was, I think it was signed by the president in March of 2010. She was nominated in April or May. Yeah. And so there was some period of overlap there where she was involved, not involved. We don't really know.
Now, a question about how the court works. No one can ask, if I understand this right, no one can ask a Supreme Court justice, or make is probably the right word, a Supreme Court justice, recuse him or herself. Only the justice can decide, is that right?
Yeah, the justice can decide, and I think a party is entitled to ask the justice to...
We can suggest.
Yeah, but you want to make sure you do that very tactfully, since if they say no, they're going to be asking you questions at the time of oral argument.
Now, there's one item that's noticeably missing from your list that you just had. And there are a couple other things they will be considering, but one they will not, at least so far, is the life issue in healthcare.
Yeah, we have objected to this new healthcare law on the grounds that it subsidizes abortion with taxpayer dollars. And that issue is still percolating out there. It won't be addressed in this particular lawsuit. There are other lawsuits percolating up In fact, there was one filed just this week on that very issue of conscience rights of religious organizations, but not so much with the taxpayer funding of abortion. So that's still out there. Even if this thing is ultimately upheld as constitutional, we still have some major concerns with it.
All right. Very helpful information, Bruce. I appreciate you sharing that with us and keeping track of it all. We appreciate you and your comments. We've been hearing from a lot of you lately, expressing your thanks for all the things that we talk about on here. Some of you like what we had to say about the presidential candidate. Some of you took issue with that. We're just offering that information to help people make an informed decision so you can figure out who resonates with you, and you get to make that choice. We don't get to make it for you. Remember, the Presidential Forum this weekend in Des Moines. Just want to encourage you once again to put that on your calendar. Remember to watch it live on CitizenLink.com. Just drop by the website and all the information is there. And remember, stand tall and be heard.